one thing that I see consistently across the financial sector is that grit. To try to kind of push the envelope, to also push yourself is a defining kind of success factor.
You know, there are different domains within finance. You have the newer stuff, the fintech, of course you have your traditional finance. So I would say different people with different personality characteristics, they can try to find a fit within the finance industry, right?
You have to be very creative, right, about how you kind of connect with people. To a certain extent, right, you need to be very gutsy and thick-skinned, and that's where the grit comes in, to connect with people. And for me, in my career opportunities, they haven't necessarily led me to the job that initially I was pursuing when I started talking to people. So I think it's being open, it's being creative, and it's having that, just being a bit thick-skinned and having that gumption. And I think LinkedIn is one of those places where people can just do it. A lot of people have talked about how we've just gone and, mailed people that they think that they won't respond to them. And maybe most of the times they don't get a response, but that 10% really makes a difference.
Welcome back to another episode of Wise and Shine. I'm your host, Dawn, Budget Babe.
And I'm Alex Lowe. You can find me on social media, Alex Lowe, Growth Mindset Coach.
Today, we're talking about a really interesting topic, one that I am very excited about. We're talking about finance, specifically life in finance. What does it take to succeed in finance? And can Budget Babe thrive in finance? I'm kidding. It's not about me, it's about you guys.
You are already thriving in finance.
But not in trade, but I'm not earning the big romanticized lifestyle and paycheck that we dream about in finance. So we're going to crack down on all of this, understand as well the shifting sentiment, because a lot of the finance professionals now are moving away from the super serious, clad in suits kind of look to being visible on LinkedIn. And two of our guests today are very visible on LinkedIn. So we'll leave them to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Angela. I'm the Head of Policy and Strategic Partnerships for APAC at TRM Labs. We are a blockchain intelligence company focused on providing crypto investigations and compliance services. My career path in finance is maybe a little bit non-traditional. I graduated from SMU in finance, X number of unknown years ago. So that part is traditional. And then I've actually spent most of my career in the public sector with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, doing financial center development, consumer financial education, and most recently was in charge of licensing payments and crypto service providers in Singapore.
And today you're now helping to shape policies in your new role outside of the public sector.
Help people understand policies, through food pictures on LinkedIn, if you
Thank you for your introduction. Zhong Liang, how about yourself? Could you introduce yourself to your audience, please?
Hi, my name is Zhong Liang. So I'm currently working as a senior investment strategist at Blackrock. So it sounds like a very big term, but essentially what I do is to kind of generate very actionable investment insights to help our clients navigate, the very volatile market conditions. Like now, we've been getting different headlines, different market moves every single day. So for me, I can share how many years ago I graduated. I graduated about 8 years ago from NTU, also majoring in finance. And yeah, since then I've been working in the space of the investment industry, right, in the investment space. And I've been through different firms and from banks, and now currently working as an asset manager.
And you forgot to mention Forbes 30 under 30.
Yes, so that just came out about two months ago. And of course, I'm honored to be one of the honorees being featured on the list itself.
And I noticed something else on your LinkedIn profile, which has got a blue tick, top voice finance. Tell us a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I got it about a year ago, and my understanding is there is like a team actually looking at the different profiles on LinkedIn, and then they would decide, okay, they have a set of criteria, I believe, and they'll decide whether this person is kind of an expert in the whatever domain space that he's creating his content in, and then they will give out that take accordingly.
So you guys did studies in finance. You went on to build your entire career in finance. And traditionally, finance has been a very, compliance-driven, keep your heads down industry. You work in regulations, right? You would know, I don't usually see anyone go out there and say, hi, I'm from MAS, or hi, I'm ex-MAS, unless they go out there. They're out of it already. And even in other countries, right? Although sometimes in America and in Europe, what they would do is to be very loud about that. But here in Asia, usually the sentiment is to keep your heads down, be quiet. You get shown the visibility that your company offers you, or in your case would be like your name and byline on those Blackrock PDF reports that go out every year to clients, right? But other than that, people don't really go out there to showcase that visibility. So how do you think this is changing in today's scene?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you should mention Americans because I work for an American company and we're actually in the crypto compliance space, providing compliance platforms to crypto businesses, financial institutions. And how I got into this idea of being visible in the public eye was actually my boss, Ari Ridbord. I actually got to know of him from LinkedIn before I actually even met him. Because just like a couple of weeks before we had a chat, he was in Singapore and then he started appearing relentlessly on my LinkedIn feed. And I was like, who is this guy and what is this company, TRM Labs? And, after that, we vibed, we clicked. I joined the company. The rest is history. But just kind of I kind of looked at Ari and saw that, he was able to have fun. He has, he posts selfies of himself running at conferences, but at the same time be very serious about the subject matter expertise that we have and we want to showcase. So I was like, yeah, I think this is a model that works. And, I think the key to it is take your work seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously.
That's a very interesting insight. Take your work seriously, but not yourself
And how
seriously.
has this changed though since you've graduated until now, the last 3 years that you...
The last 3 years since I graduated. Well, I think for one, social media has, in the last X years or so been just kind of on the uptake, and many people are much more engaged in social media today, whether we're talking about professional social media like LinkedIn or even Instagram and, Facebook and what have you, TikTok. So I think we are just much more digitally comfortable with engaging each other digitally. And in fact, as a fun fact, I was the second employee of TRM Labs in Singapore. It was 10 months before I met any of my colleagues in the flesh from the rest of the world. But, by the time I met them, I feel like I know them already. So I think this is just the reality of the digital world that we live in. And that's what's made it much easier to connect with each other on digital platforms such as LinkedIn.
Because of Zoom calls and following their LinkedIn posts?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you are on a Zoom call, at least for me, you kind of forget that you're on a Zoom call. You really don't feel that kind of distance, especially when you're being very candid and you're working with each other on a day-to-day basis.
Angela, you came from ex-MAS regulatory side, and we usually don't see MAS people being very public or posting a lot on LinkedIn. Was that still true when you were there?
I would say that even at MAS, it is gradually evolving. If you notice, MAS is also much more active on LinkedIn with their official accounts. They're using LinkedIn for recruitment. So they also want, some of their key management to have visibility. And we do indeed see some of these key individuals posting much more than when I joined. I think, as with everything, Singapore has always been very kind of forward-looking, and the regulator also has to evolve its engagement methods with how the industry is evolving.
Actually, I would say shout out to Alvin Tan because he led a lot of this.
That
He's
is true.
So
That is
active
true.
on his social media postings to help, humanize MAS and the image of the organization in general. Not organization, regulatory body.
Definitely
in general.
helps with talent acquisition, I'm sure, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe Zhong Liang, you can share also a little bit about your role. I wouldn't say role, but then your activity on LinkedIn and the kinds of content that you're sharing when it comes to finance. What is the motivation behind all of that?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, most of the content that I kind of curate on LinkedIn, they are mainly investment related. I think for me back then was, I have a lot of views, a lot of thoughts going on in my mind, and I just needed a channel to share them, right? And back then I was a little bit more junior, of course, than through the sort of the professional route, there wasn't a place to share. So LinkedIn becomes, a place for me to share some of these views and thoughts. And I think I also like the fact that there is the engagement. So, other people would share their views and in the comments, and then that build on, and then eventually you get like a engagement, a conversation going on LinkedIn. So I think that is the other aspect that maybe it's not often talk about, right?
Yeah,
their conversations as well.
Indeed. And I think I've been writing about finance for years, like 11 years by now. And one thing that I noticed is that in the beginning, a lot of the finance professionals were like just super quiet. Then at the halfway mark, we started to see the robo-advisors. So the investment, the CIOs of these robo-advisors and the new age digital brokerages, right? Because they are not bound by the traditional finance organizations and their rules and cultures, they started to be a bit more visible. You could now hear the CIO of, let's say, Endow Us or Scythe and the new age digital players actually share their views online, and they're pretty social about it. You wouldn't hear the JPM, Blackrock or Aberdeen person talking about all of this. Do you think that that trend is still the case today? Or are you seeing that these professionals are also now starting to realize that, hey, we can actually be more visible publicly?
Yeah, I think that has changed.
You seeing a trend?
Especially so in the last few years, right? So right now, a lot of, like you say, JPM, BlackRock, Stanchart, all the big banks, right, the big asset managers, their investment leaders are on LinkedIn and sharing almost on the regular basis as well. So I think it's very different from the past. Now LinkedIn is being also, at least from what I'm aware, is also being used by marketing teams in these firms as a place to commercialize some stuff as well, to essentially sell, right? So, and of course, a lot of the target audience for this asset managers, banks, they are actually on LinkedIn. The professionals who tends to have a little bit more of cash, who can invest, they are on LinkedIn, right? So these are the target audience that they are going after as well.
It can be hard to survive in finance sometimes because, it's a very cutthroat industry and there are some unspoken rules that you only learn about when you enter the industry. What are some of these unspoken rules that both of you have encountered in your career?
Whenever you show up in meetings and whatever opinions that you make, it has to be backed by data, especially in my field, right, where it's investment related. So I mean, this is something that I was quite surprised, given that back in school, sometimes you just voice certain opinions, but you don't really substantiate it with data and make sure that it's verified as well, right? So that is, I think, one unspoken rule. The other one is, and this time I came to realize it by myself, is that actually a lot of the actions actually happens outside of meetings. So within meetings, if you propose certain things, actually most of the time outside of it, you need to do a lot of convincing already before you get into the meeting and you bring it up and then you get the buy-in. So the buy-in actually happens outside of meetings. So I guess, these are the two sort of unspoken rules. Maybe Angela has additional to add.
Absolutely. I think everything that you write, everything that you say has to be backed up by credible data, by a credible source. And that's why, I'm always going back to, things that I read, sometimes on social media, on LinkedIn as well, other people posting. Sometimes I read it on different media sites, right? And I will try and go back to the primary source because especially when we're talking about Asian markets, sometimes things get lost in translation when they are moved from the local native media to the Western media. So I think that is definitely one principle that I personally abide by very closely because I know that people are reading this and they're making decisions based on the things that you say, which is, a privileged position to be in, but also a responsibility that you have to bear.
Yeah. So aside from backing up what you share and opine about with data, what behaviors or traits get rewarded in finance and which ones get quietly penalized?
So I'm not actually a finance professional because I was a financial regulator. The culture is a little bit different, but I would say a couple of things. Being able to write clearly, write well, detail orientation. You better don't try and hide things in the footnotes because you will get asked about these.
And all listed companies do.
I look at footnotes, and sometimes that is where the most valuable nuggets of information are. I'm sure you know that as well, John.
All the time.
I'll add, I guess, being proactive is quite an important trait in finance, just because, especially when you're a junior, right, your seniors are so busy, there's no way that they don't have time for you, right? Being proactive will allow you to gain that visibility, to gain that exposure, right? Being able to do a little bit more as well. I think the other, to echo as well, being meticulous, I think that's important because in finance, it's an industry that requires high precision, right? You're going to affect the livelihood of other people. So you got to make sure that whatever things or output that you generate, they have to be 100% accurate. So being meticulous with the numbers, with the facts, etc., that's something that we do see a lot across a lot of different finance professionals as well.
And maybe I can bring a perspective from where I am now, which is kind of like a fintech startup scale-up space, right? I think you need to be willing to try. You need to be willing to experiment because we want people to be contributing to robust debate so that we can come to the best decisions and to be willing to try things, because if you don't try, you never know.
So it's about having an opinion, right? Because
Not any opinion.
Evidence-backed
opinions.
And how do you feel your LinkedIn visibility and your posting have made you different or stand out or change the perception of who you are within the organization?
As part of the team that's supposed to amplify TRM Lab's thought leadership, it's something that is quite accepted. I think the moment when I was like, oh my gosh, am I too much into this LinkedIn thing, was when my husband introduced me to his colleagues as an influencer. And I was like, that was not, that was not what I was setting out to be. But, I guess there is a good thing that it connotes influence. And I think that has opened many doors for myself personally and also for the company. So I have journalists that are reaching out to me that say, hey, actually, I saw your LinkedIn post on this topic and I'm actually writing an article on it. Then it amplifies, some of our thought leadership in the media as well. I even had a regulator in one instance email me and say that I actually saw your write-up. Actually, it was a video, I think, on this case. And we'd actually like to find out more. So it's really a very good channel to connect with people from all walks of life.
So you're saying is internally it has actually made your role being perceived more positively by your colleagues as well, and externally it has actually led to even more credibility and influence for you.
And of course the company.
Of course. So for people who want to move into finance, who are already in finance and wanting to succeed, what do you think really, really takes?
I think there are many different segments of finance today, right? There's what we call traditional finance. There's, decentralized finance, crypto, there's fintech. And I do think the archetypes that succeed in each of these sectors are slightly different. But one thing that I see consistently across the financial sector is that grit. And actually, maybe that's something that you need to succeed in life, right? That grit to try to kind of push the envelope, to also push yourself, I think is a defining kind of success factor.
I think Angela spoke about the fact that, there are different domains within finance. You have the newer stuff, the fintech, of course you have your traditional finance. And also finance industry has a lot of functions, right? You have HR function even in finance industry. You have corporate functions within finance industry as well. So I would say different people with different personality characteristics, they can try to find a fit within the finance industry, right? But if we were to zoom in into maybe, based on my experience within the investment space, I think being good with numbers is something that is a baseline, right? If you want to get into finance, right? Because if you are dealing with investments day in, day out, you're looking at numbers. Being quick with numbers is a baseline expectations. And if you are not good with it, then potentially you should look at ways on how you can build that up. And earlier on, we were talking about, building that visibility, building a network. That is something also that's very valuable in finance industry as well, especially if you are doing a sales role within finance. That network is basically your net worth, right? That's how you're going to start generating, start bringing in sort of the revenue for the firm and start pushing your products out to different prospective clients as well.
And just to kind of echo that point on network, right, and what I said earlier on grit, I think you have to be very creative, right, about how you kind of connect with people. And I remember kind of when I was contemplating a move from public to private sector, I spent a lot of time kind of doing that. And in a certain extent, right, you need to be very gutsy and thick-skinned, and that's where the grit comes in, to connect with people. Maybe it's a second-degree connection, or it's someone you work in the company, but it's not directly related to the role. And funnily, all of these conversations have a way of coming together. And for me, in my career opportunities, they haven't necessarily led me to the job that initially I was pursuing when I started talking to people, but they've led me to a place where I feel that, hey, I found this fit. And now there's this like meme on Instagram about the butterfly effect, right? Sometimes when I think back, if I didn't have this conversation with this person, that's the story of my current job. If I didn't have this conversation that led to this other conversation to end with another person, that eventually led me to having another coffee with that same person 3 months later on a different topic, I wouldn't have met my boss. So I think it's being open, it's being creative, and it's having that, just being a bit thick-skinned and having that gumption to try. And I think LinkedIn is one of those places where people can just do it. A lot of people have talked about how we've just gone and, mailed people that they think that they won't respond to them. And maybe most of the times they don't get a response, but that 10% really makes a difference.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying Wise and Shine so far. I'm your host Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and for us to continue to do this show so that you become a tad bit wiser every week, you gotta like, share, subscribe, help us beat the algorithm, but even more importantly, if you can, comment in the comment section below, let us know your thoughts and also some questions that you would love us to answer. Yep, now back to the show.
So we've been talking a lot about commercially driven roles, right? Where you need to network, you need that gumption, you need to meet new people. But of course, that is the front-facing, right? Those guys that are fighting the war out there. But what about the supporting roles in finance? Does it also require that same sort of grit, same sort of gumption and same sort of networking?
Or visibility?
Yeah, maybe I'll take that question. I'll say maybe less visibility is required if you're in the support function. But of course, if you're looking to grow, in fact, a lot of the support function, we eventually want to move, we want to try different things, then of course that visibility is still important. But I'll say for support function, it is a different skill set, right? Early on, I spoke about numbers, that being good with numbers, making sense of numbers. I think that is still important because even in the support function, a lot of the work that let's say the sales bring in, the deal, and then that's being passed on to the support. And in fact, support looks at these numbers at a much closer inspection as well. So I'll say being good with numbers, that's also very essential. But on top of that, I think as support, if you're in sort of a support roles, there are a lot of other skill sets that are equally important, if not more important as well, right? One, being able to project manage, because a lot of times support roles, they are really dealing with different things at one time. And because of the nature of the industry, one support maybe have to deal with a couple of sales, right? Different sales can be coming to you with different requests. So being able to manage your priorities, to manage different tasks, to project manage, I think that's also very important. Time management is also a key part if you are in sort of a support role.
And Angela, I mean, you are employee number 2, right? Or you were employee number 2. So you probably were straddling support role as well as a front-facing role. How does that apply to a company like yours?
I think it's really having that mindset of, in a startup. And I think for us, we are more like a scale-up stage, but the Singapore office was very much at the startup phase. And this is something I ask myself constantly. What is the most important thing to help the company succeed right now? And that is what I focus my energies on. So and I think that is something that's very much encouraged within the company. Don't get limited by your title. Don't get limited by what's on your JD. Think about your strengths. Think about where the company is at now. And how can you marry that, right? To push the company's success to the next level. Because the company's success is your success. The company's success is your rice bowl.
That's so true. You guys gave really good examples of what it takes to succeed in finance and to thrive there. But are there certain personality types or people who you think should not enter finance? Other than those who are not good with numbers or who are not detail-oriented, but are there certain characteristics that you find, okay, if you're not this, then maybe this industry is not for you?
Actually, like I said, there are many different archetypes, right? Like TradFi to crypto to fintech. Even the things they wear is completely different. I have been to conferences where it's suits only. I have been to conferences where people are on stage in shorts and t-shirt. I think actually finance, right, when you talk about it that broadly, is a very diverse space, and there's a nook for everyone, right? You can be that creative kind of maverick type. Maybe you're more into the fintech DeFi space. If you are the one that likes to look, okay, not saying that DeFi people don't like to look at spreadsheets, but I like to look at my spreadsheets. I like to get my tailored suits, and I like everything to be very structured. then maybe that is, things that are more in the traditional space. Okay, also got people in traditional space wear t-shirt, okay?
Yes. Yeah, I'll very much echo that, right? It's so big, it's so broad, and I mean the financial hub in Singapore is one of the key GDP drivers, right? And there's really a role for everyone. I think that's the core message I want to share. So don't let, I guess, certain weakness of you hold you back from trying, right?
Yes.
Finding your space within the larger
Yes.
finance
The only
industry.
thing that limits you is actually your own mindset. And that's true not just of a career in finance, but in general, right? If you think that, okay, I'm not suitable for finance because I don't have XYZ or I'm ABC, then it will kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But actually, finance is a very, very diverse space filled with many different types of characters.
I want to ask, a lot of people romanticize a career in finance. Lots of people want to enter finance because of, ideas such as, high pay, you get to meet, you get to stay in 5-star hotels, go for cool atas conferences and all that stereotype, right? What do you think is a disillusion view that people usually have? Like, they always think this is what finance is like, but in reality, it's something else.
So I definitely romanticized finance when I was a fresh graduate, right? I thought that I would be a private banker and do all those things that you mentioned. Then, boom, financial crisis of X years, 2008, 2009. Okay, I just dated myself.
Just exposed.
I just dated myself, which I've been trying so hard not to do.
Yeah.
And then the options shifted. All the kind of banking jobs that I wanted at the time the doors closed. But the door opened for me to join the MAS, which was a completely different experience, but a very good one. And that's why I say, sometimes the conversations that you have and the things that you do, it doesn't lead you to the path or the goal that you set out, but it leads you to somewhere that's meaningful for you. I mean, sorry lah, more economy class than business class tickets, even now. I think in many fintechs, people fly economy as a matter of practice. So, it's not about that, but it's about the impact that you have. And I think coming to the reality of both the hard work, as well as the some of the more difficult things that happen, but also not losing sight of the impact of the fun that you can have, even when you're flying in economy.
Zhong Liang, are there any...
Actually, you talked about the lifestyle of a finance graduate, right? But this one passé already.
Finance professional.
Finance, this is like many, many years back, right? Then after that, it was tech, right? Everyone wanted to move into tech. But I think now is the intersection of finance and tech, which is the space that you're in. And Zhong Liang, would you consider yourself to be in that space or more the traditional?
More traditional.
Yeah. So it would be great to hear from you on your opinion on that. Yeah.
Yeah, but even though I'm more in the traditional finance space, I would say tech has increasingly become a big part of our daily process, right? AI has become an important tool for us to increase our productivity. So even though we are not in the tech space, tech is something that is a core part of our day-to-day life as well.
So this question for both of you, right? So I'm in my mid-40s, towards the late 40s, and a lot of my peers are MDs, directors in traditional banks, right? And they have they're very successful in their career and they're very happy spending time with the family. And I think there is a mindset or thought out there that if you go into finance, you would be able to provide for your families very, very well. Is this something that you can attest to with the families that you have, as also in terms of the work-life balance and the lifestyle that you lead?
So I would say that there are many different fields that you can provide for your family very well. It's ultimately what you're good at, right? People pay you for doing a good job, whether it's finance or not. And at the end of the day, I think the expectations are commensurate to the compensation, right? And of course, I think some of that does translate into jobs with very demanding hours. And I think for me, I have 2 young children. It's about having that flexibility, right? It's work-life flexibility, where I'm trusted to manage my time. I mean, there's still a lot to be done, but I'm trusted to manage my time in a way that works for me. And I think that is where a lot of companies in the tech and fintech space are moving towards. Like, I don't care where you are. I just care that you get the objectives met.
Since you brought up about work-life balance, Piyush, I'm not sure if you recall Piyush Gupta, the ex-CEO of DVS, he used to brought up this term called the work-life integration. And it got quite a bit of backlash.
We talk about this on Wise and Shine.
Oh yeah, so
Link in the episode.
for me, I'm actually a believer of work-life integration. And why so is because I feel like you need to have a passion to be in finance, right? And if you have that passion, it doesn't feel like work.
Yes.
Right? Because if I'm naturally someone that's interested about markets, I'm curious about economy, when I'm doing it, I don't feel I'm working, right? It can be just like a side hobby or a passion of mine, right? So if I'm doing like a weekend reading, catch up on markets, it doesn't feel like work to me. But if you don't like it, then yeah, it can be quite tiring, right, on the minds, and you can feel like it's a burden.
Absolutely. I was in a session with my personal trainer, right? And he was like, maybe you channel your stress and your rage and your anger at people. And I was like, actually, I don't really have that. I have a lot of work, but I actually get up feeling excited to do this.
So it boils back to purpose and meaning in having passion in the work that we do.
But okay, having said that though, it is still true that the floor and the ceiling of the finance industry is higher. And I say this as someone who works in background checks because I screen resumes for all sorts of different companies and roles. The finance one, let's just say, every time I look at that, I question, why am I not in finance? Why am I only doing this social media gig and not actually working in one of the Blackrock or, the big firms where I can get way more than what I'm earning right now? And like you guys said, it's the passion, it's the interest, which I have as well, but I don't get compensated that way. And to some people, because this is also increasingly becoming more of an interest, right? I think there was this recent survey showing that Singaporeans are actually becoming more interested in financial literacy and financial news and all. So I can imagine a lot of people are developing this passion and interest in it, but not everyone may enter finance. So do you think then, how do they strike the balance? Should they then go in because, that field is so well paid? Or you think that, no, there are other ways of balancing it, and just because you're passionate about finance doesn't mean you're going to succeed in finance?
I think there's a term called ikigai, right? Where it's like what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what the world will pay you for, and the intersection of that. And so, the passion has to be married with skill and also with the demand in the industry.
You could get better at your skills. You have the passion to learn.
That is true. That is very true. So I would say it's really up to you, right? I don't think that going to a career in finance is like a pathway, is like a sure pathway to everything being smooth sailing in life. Neither do I say that, you shouldn't go into finance because it's crowded and there are all these challenges. I would say don't try, you never know.
You have to first put your hands up and try for it, right? And one point that I will add here is that the same role can exist in different parts of finance, right? Take, for example, investment research role. It can exist in asset manager like where I am now, but it can also exist in
the brokerage,
the banks, the robos, right? And of course, some of these places have maybe a lower bar for you to get into, right? So don't restrict yourself that, I definitely have to get into the bulge brackets, the bigger names, right? You can start off from some of the small shops, family offices. In fact, Singapore is big on recruiting family offices, and they are hiring a lot of investment research analysts. So you can start elsewhere and eventually work your way to where you want to be.
I would say that Singaporeans do kind of chase after brands, right? Like you want to work for the branded companies, whatever sector you're in. And I think one thing that I've learned working in the startup space is don't just chase after brands. I think understand the company, understand the objectives, what they're trying to do, and see how well that aligns with your personal value system and your skill set. It doesn't mean that a company that doesn't have the brand that, is plastered all over the ads is not able to pay well. I think that's a very common misconception.
Thank you for sharing. I think this has been very exciting. I've enjoyed this chat, especially from where I am. And I hope you guys have actually found something out of this episode to help you decide. I love what you guys shared about how finance is just so broad. Don't limit yourself to the mindset because there's so many different archetypes in finance, so many different industries, and so many different roles. And what it takes to succeed, based on what you guys have shared, actually exists also in other industries. Maybe just the two differences that I spotted was like, you got to be good with numbers, detail-oriented, and work-life integration. Not work-life balance. So thank you for joining us on this episode.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. We hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you're not already on our social media,
please go on to www.thefinancialcoconut.com and leave your email address there so that you can be kept updated of episodes that we launch weekly.
And if you have any friends who are aspiring to get into finance or to make a mid-career switch into finance, make sure you send them this episode to help the algorithm algorithm because we're all trying to crack the LinkedIn algorithm, Instagram algorithm, Spotify algorithm, whatever it is. But we hope that you have enjoyed, and let us know in the comments if there's anything else that you would like to know. If not, we'll see you on the next episode of Wise and Shine. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.